Welcome to A Well-Designed Business with your host, LuAnn. LuAnn has a lifetime of experience building a multi-million-dollar business with her husband and cousin, and she knows the challenges you face in your interior design business. LuAnn brings you real-life answers to your most pressing problems, as well as practical strategies to explode your interior design business. So, let's get to the business of interior design.
Hi, welcome to another episode of A Well-Designed Business. I know for absolute certain when many of you opened your podcast app this morning, you started smiling ear to ear because Amber Lewis is back on the show today. The number of people that emailed me, direct message me, private message me, and just publicly said how much that they loved her show and were so happy that she mentioned that she was coming back on again was really ridiculous, truthfully. So if you missed her episode, it was recently, last month, number 169. Go back after this one and listen to that one. In that episode, we talked all about how Amber built her blog, how she built her blog, her following on Instagram, and the challenges that she faced in specifically doing that. And today, Amber and I go a bit deeper into the business side of her business and how she discovered this podcast last winter and that she even signed up for Kimberley Seldon's courses because of this podcast. Because you know what? Even Amber, with a firm as successful and as large as hers, sometimes she looks around and wonders if there could be a better way or a different way to run her firm more efficiently. So take heart. You are not alone. Amber knows where you are and what you are doing and what you're going through because she's been there. And today she shares her advice and the things that she learned along the way. Hang tight while I tell you about our sponsor, and I'll be right back with Amber Lewis. My great thanks to my Doma Studio, our podcast sponsor. What is my Doma Studio? Well, you know, as busy interior designers, that running your own design firm isn't just about designing. That's what we talk about here all the time, right? There's managing contracts, clients, payments, products, and a million other things that you have to have locked down. It is challenging, but you must run your firm efficiently so you can do the fun, creative things you enjoy so much. And that's where my Doma Studio comes in. I'd like to invite you to try My Doma Studio today. Go to mydomastudio.com/a-well-designed-business. Designers around the world are using My Doma Studio. What about you? Let My Doma Studio help you organize the business side and spend more time on the designing side of your firm. I'd also like to share with you that Vin, Bill, and myself are so impressed with My Doma Studio that we have invested in this company. So see for yourself what My Doma Studio can do for your interior design business. And if you visit using the link mydomastudio.com/a-well-designed-business, you will receive a special offer just for you as listeners of the podcast. Hi, Amber. Thanks so much for coming back on the show today.
LuAnn, I am so excited to be back today. Thanks for having me again.
I am too. This is like crazy because your first show was on not so long ago, and the amount of buzz that your first show generated, I said it to you. I knew it when we were in the conversation that it was a great show and that you were just so giving and so open. And when you were like, I'd like to do this again, I was like, heck yeah, lady, let's do it.
I know. I had a great time doing it, and I thought it was really fun. And as soon as we got off air, I was like, you know what? I got to come back. I got to talk about other stuff. Like, nobody wants to hear about my Instagram. I mean, they do, but I think people really want the nitty gritty of like, how the hell did she get here and what happened? What's her story?
It's the truth.
Let's get the scoop.
It's the truth. So, it's a wide open book. I just said to you off air, I usually have a whole list of questions that I kind of want to ask, but I just feel like there's so many different directions that we could go. And I thought, let's just sort of dive in. And one of the things that you said to me before, on the other show, at the end of the other show, was that here you are, you've got this big business and all of this success and this nice company, and you still were just as recently as, 2 months ago sitting and thinking, I need some answers to some things, and where am I going to get them, right? And that's how you actually found the podcast. So tell us a little bit about, because I think most people think that once you get to that level, hey, it's easy street and I just show up for work every day and make things wonderful and go home. So what kinds of things are you struggling with? Well, where would you rather start with? Things that you're struggling with now a little bit, or things like from the beginning that you're like, hey, I could tell you this was hard, but I found my way through it and here's what it was like. What do you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely one of the things that going into interior design business, and that was one of the things that I didn't necessarily know from my previous, if you listen to the last podcast, which I hope you guys all did, but the last one, my last job that I was in, I wasn't really involved with the majority of like the nitty gritty of what went down behind the scenes, the bookkeeping, the invoicing, the contracts. I mean, I really had to find my footing on my own with all of this stuff. And over the years of consulting with lawyers and consulting with whoever, I've probably changed my system and changed like the way that I do business 15 times. And that's the truth. And one of the things that even as I grow, and every time we get a new client and every time I kind of step into what I feel like is a new whole realm of my business, I have to check myself to make sure I'm doing it right. I'm working on a different caliber of clients than I ever was when I first started. When I first started, I was doing a room, and now we're building houses from the ground up, and they're, the size of a city. So like, I have to really know what I'm doing. I'm serious. And and so there's a level of, because this isn't something that I think a lot of interior designers specifically are very freely giving up this information. It's almost like this dirty little secret of like, I'm not going to tell you how much I charge, or I'm not going to really go into details of how the ins and outs are. I really had to kind of figure it out on my own and go down a hole of just like, man, am I doing it right? So about 2 months ago, we were kind of in contract to sign on a pretty big job, and to date, one of the biggest jobs I will ever do, and probably hopefully won't be the last one I ever do this big. It's amazing. But for some really big clients and really, really reputable, incredible architect firms and contractor. I mean, just this world, I'm like, I'm too much of a small fish in this big pond. Like, I better come with knowledge here. And so I was just making sure that my contract was buttoned up and making sure that I was charging what was right for, how I'm going to be doing this. And I struggled with whether or not to charge hourly and whether or not to charge a flat fee. Like, I've gone through that. I've done that dance back and forth. So I kind of just found your podcast because I was like, you know what, I'm going to just hear if she talks about it with anybody else, of like how they bill and what they do. And it was really informative for me because that's how I actually got turned on to Kimberley Seldon's business. And that, I mean, it wasn't, I would say specifically for me, I think it was more of just like an affirmation. It wasn't really, I didn't have any bing, 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 this was great, but it was really helpful to know that I was on that, the same par, everything felt the same pricing structure and the way that I was doing contracts. My contracts are a lot more in depth. They're numerous pages long. It's a little less simplified, basically because we're doing so much construction. There's a lot of liability clause stuff, so that I just whatever. And I have numerous NDAs, which non-disclosure agreements. So it's all fun and games and cute when everyone sees oh, wow, she's just going to blast every project. No, I have the ones that I can talk about, and then the multitudes of ones that I don't talk about.
Because
so
there's a lot of is requesting the NDA, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's higher profile clients that we have that I just can't say anything. And I just have to kind of make sure I cover my bases with that. I have to be really careful all the time. It's so hard for me because
you're so open.
I know. Oh man, I don't think I'm allowed to say that. I got to really watch my tongue here. But anyway, so I looked for some other other kind of insight as to like how other people were doing it. And I was pleased to see that I felt like I was on the right path, but I had to do some research, and I
Well, it's
definitely
nice to
don't know.
know that when you look into something, you find, oh, okay, so I was a little concerned and I was a little wondering if I was doing it right. But in your case, you found that you were. But I think going back to one of the first things that you were sharing was that when you left that last position, you said you weren't really the one doing the bookkeeping, you weren't the one doing the contracts, and of course you leave there feeling pretty good about yourself, that your talent is pretty well established and you can run a firm. But it's sort of like, oh, hello, there's a whole lot more to it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really the big message in the podcast itself, but for you too, what you're sharing is, if somebody is out there listening and they're feeling like a rock star in the firm that they're working with, and they're really feeling solid in their footing on how they design and how they pull things together, that if they're not going to stay at that firm long enough to also learn the back end of it, they've got to go out and educate themselves on how to do it. Otherwise, I mean, look, I'm so happy to know that, all these years later, that you have finally stumbled and figured out the right way to run your business. But it's sort of, it's a sin that you had to go through, like you said, 15 iterations of how to do it. It's like,
it's a sin, LuAnn, but then there's also a little bit of, and I feel like I talked a lot last time about like, you have to have the chops for this business. You have to have really thick skin. And I feel like you have to you have to jump into the world thinking that you're going to be batting like with these heavy hitters. You can't just, I mean, in my case, especially, like I instantly kind of became catapulted into dealing with people that were way, way, way more professional and talented than I was. And I had to totally fake it until literally, you have to fake it till you make it. And I kind of had to like talk the talk, but I definitely couldn't walk the walk. So the behind the scenes of what was going on, if I'm like frantically trying to figure out if I'm doing everything correctly, taught me a lot, because I would kind of jump into a project doing it one way when I first started. And by the end of that project, my next 2 clients that I had signed on, I was like, I will never do that again, because I learned so much from this project. And it's funny now, because like we'll have projects that have been lingering for like 2 years that are just wrapping up. I'm like, wait, how much was I charging 2 years ago? Or what was it? What were we doing? Not like it's wrong, but you have to kind of remember, like, I've just changed so much. We've just changed so much. We've evolved so many times.
What happened? Was it really the blog taking off? Like when you just said there that right from the beginning you were sort of catapulted into a pool that was, where you were swimming above your pay grade, you were swimming above your level there. And what was it? Was it the blog that catapulted you, or was there one great project that displayed your aesthetic so beautifully that it just automatically ramped you up to another level? What was that thing that happened there?
I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I don't know. This is maybe where luck comes in. I don't know, because I feel like maybe because when I first, I don't know, I've never had to really self-reflect here. So maybe let's say like if I had to look at that and really kind of like decide what was the turning point for me, or what exactly was it, I think there was always a little part of me that was maybe a couple steps ahead of what is like ends up becoming so trendy that you're sick of seeing it. So where there's a part of me that was like, there was a lot of these like really amazing, hip, cute clients that were coming to us, and they were starting a family, or they were building their houses or whatever. And they were on the cusp of knowing kind of, it's like skinny jeans. It's like all of a sudden everyone's like, what the hell are skinny jeans? And then everybody's wearing a skinny jean. It's kind of like it was that little bit of a line that I crossed where I think I was just ahead enough that I was really one of the only ones doing a certain look, or really kind of had put my stamp on whatever however you describe my look, California eclectic, as that was kind of my vibe. And then it slowly kind of filtered into so many other designers' work, and so many other people started to kind of do it. And I think those that knew that I was doing it were kind of already working with me. So by the time as like I'm evolving and showing different work, those clients are wanting the next thing. So I kind of like jumped in front of the wave before it crashed.
Well, that's a particular skill, though. Even if I can hear you having a hard time literally describing it, and like you said, you hadn't self-reflected on it before. But I know that to be a skill in almost every industry. There are always the people that are just a little more intuitive, they just get it a little bit more, and you might not really, like you said, really have thought about it, but that really could be the one thing that just nudged you out ahead. Now, of course, you have to get ahead and stay ahead, and you have to get ahead and come with the goods. And you had to learn eventually to, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. But that other little thing is, it's sort of like, when this seems crazy, but it goes through my mind like Jackie Onassis. She just had something. Right? Yeah, she's not the most beautiful woman in the world. Let's be serious. Look at her face. Absolutely. She's attractive, but she's not like, Angelina Jolie. Like, let's be real. But there is something about her. And so what you're saying is that there was probably, when you reflect, just something about your design that was just a little bit, right?
Yeah. And I think that there was also a lot of intuition, but there was a lot of just like, I really apply intuition and trusting my gut to every single thing that I do.
Good for you.
So when I first started, and when I was first, let's just say I was working on like if you equate it to fashion, right? Like there's a J. Crew, there's maybe like an Isabel Marant, and then there's Chanel, right? So we've got like a 3-level. When I was J. Crew in it, and when I was kind of like to the more of the masses, I was just doing enough that it felt really different. So whether or not it was like vintage pieces that weren't something that you could purchase online, or whether or not it was just like the pillow combinations I was doing or colors I was pairing together, it was an intuition and a taste level that I felt like I just had, and I was able to sort of convince everybody to let me do it. So I think once I took photos of those and like kind of took photos of those projects and had it out into the world, then people became more like really into it, and they were looking at it on Pinterest and looking at it, whatever, then showing their designers, and then their designers were doing it. And then by the time I had gotten my next wave of clients, like I said, I was already like on to the next thing. So I was kind of trusting my intuition, trusting what I knew was going to be sort of trending now, but then also like when I'm ready to move to the next thing, how do I like now shift to really pushing the envelope again? And I've just sort of done that I've done that kind of throughout the whole 5 years that I've been doing this. Just sort of trying to one up myself each time and not do the same thing twice, which is actually which is really tough to do, by the way, because clients want me to do the exact same thing over and over again.
They want the Amber Lewis look, right?
So I have to kind of convince, like, no, this is the new Amber.
That's so yesterday's Amber.
I always like make the joke, like, please, that's so 2014. I'm like so not about that anymore. No. You know what it is. You want to make sure that your clients get their money's worth, and that you're offering more than what they just saw. Right. You don't want to see that.
I hear that. Yeah. So what would you say to somebody listening, though, that is it simply the message in that is to trust your instinct and your gut if you're looking and you're designing a space and something just strikes you as this maybe doesn't quite follow the rules or make sense, and just go with because we can't just say to people, well, you had a great instinct and you were ahead of the curve, because they can't duplicate that.
I know.
Well, that was amazing for Amber. We're all beat.
You either got it or you don't. See ya. No, it's not like that at all.
Well, that's it. So there has to be something in there that you could say, like I heard the intuition, and I love that. I love trusting your instinct and trusting your gut. But what could we say to help somebody who's like, okay, but a little bit more? How do I do it? Yeah,
I think it's just knowing or being. Here we go. Let's be comfortable with evolution, everybody. Like we can all. I think it's being comfortable knowing that your style may completely change 14 different times from 1 month to the next. And it's like complete design bipolar. We're like 1 minute I'm in love with this thing, and another minute I'm in love with another thing. And I think for someone who's out there listening and trying to be, this designer that's not peg-holed into one thing. I think you have to be open to trying something different, A, and B, also evolving, knowing that just because you did something in 2014, that's not what you have to do in 2017. And you can also, be confident and stand firm in your relationship with your clients, that you're saying like, no, this is exactly what we're going to do, and you're going to love it. And this is why you're going to love it. And you don't want that because you're showing me a photo. So obviously it's been done. My favorite clients are the ones that don't show me photos. Okay. Because they're the ones that are telling me, well, of course I have to have something kind of relatable, but more of like, it's an abstract thing. It's not a specific room. Or if they're taking a room, they're liking one thing out of it and they're not saying recreate this, because it's the ones who want me to recreate they don't want creative. They really just want me to
They just need somebody to execute it, to buy all the stuff from all the different places and put it in the room, right? That's not bringing your vision to it and your collaboration to it, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the message really is just try to evolve, be comfortable with evolving, trust your intuition, and know that you're going to have to stand really, really, really firm that you are convicted to your design and you're convicted to what you're, selling.
And do you feel that is that one of the things that you had when you were younger and starting out, that even though you were younger, you just was like, no, this is it?
Yep.
Okay. So that's unusual, I think, for a younger person, let alone designer person. Do you know what I'm saying? So that would be good advice in there to be, if you have a sense of your own style and you have a sense and confidence of yourself as a designer, don't be swayed. Don't be talked out of a vision, to stand there and, fight for the vision. And for, look, I don't think for 1 second that you're expressing someone's home you should design to look the way you want, not they want, but that you're talking about the places where you move them along and just tweak it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can look at my portfolio and I use the reference, like I would hope that you could kind of call me off on a lineup, like, a prison lineup out of anywhere. Like you'd be able to tell that was my room, but that no two rooms would look the same. So what I hope is that, there's sort of, if you peg my style as just my name, right? So there's a little bit of Amber in all of it, so that even from the jobs that I was doing in 2014 versus the ones that I'm doing now, there may be elements that are exactly the same, but they've all evolved and look different and don't, feel like the exact same room that I'm just cranking out over and over and over again.
Exactly. So, and then look, like you said, people really do, if they've missed the first interview, have to hear it, because your evolution of how you came along and became in business is an interesting story. But to that point, standing in your space there as a young designer and really saying to the client, look, trust me on this. That just is who you are, right? That's it's just who you are. Yeah. So if it's not somebody, they have to cultivate that. They need to cultivate it to be in business to begin with, but
absolutely. You can't run your own business if you can't stand there and sell what you're like, and be convicted to what you're selling. So if you're trying to say to someone, they have to, use pink curtains, and by no means you don't even think that they should use pink curtains, you better tell them that they should use pink curtains, because you've presented it now. You don't want to look like a jerk now by saying, oh, actually, now let's change that. No, because then they're going to get uncomfortable. Right. Everybody's going to then go, well, do you like it or do you don't like it? So once you say it,
that's it. That's it. I've mentioned Vince Latuca on the podcast before. He's long since passed away, and I used to work with him in the late 80s and early 90s, and he was so famous for that. He was such a highly regarded New York interior designer, and he just did the best work, and it was the truth. I can remember being on projects with him, and he would stand back and look at me, and he'd say, okay with that lamp. And I'd be like, what? He'd be like, well, it's gorgeous now, darling. It was there and that was it. There was no going back and no being wishy-washy about it,
Right. You can't. You absolutely can't. Because if you're wishy-washy about it, you're kind of setting that tone to clients that they
can challenge or question or wonder or be afraid. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I also too, I've definitely learned I didn't just come out, let's say, come out of the womb saying that. It's not like I was like, yep, this is exactly what's going to happen. I definitely had moments where, man, I was challenged and the client was like, no, I really want this. So you have to pick and choose your battles. But I think if you come convicted in a presentation, if you're ready to kind of like make this vision happen and know what you are, if you can stand on your own 2 feet, the minute you show any kind of sign of weakness or wavering, then they focus on that too. Mm-hmm. And that's been like one of those things that I've really, really, really noticed, especially actually with contractors and developers.
Oh yeah.
They're the ones that like you give any kind of inkling that you're unsure about something, and they will just like make sure that it actually goes wrong no matter what.
Well, it's the truth. It's almost sometimes, and I hate to put a whole bunch of people in one single boat, but I have for many years experienced the same thing. It's almost like there's times when I just want to look at them and go, can we all just play on the same team? Like, why do you have to be adversarial about this? Like,
right.
What is that about?
I mean, we're getting to a point where like that is less and less and less, but I've definitely come across a lot of that kind of as I'm kind of growing the business and sort of the more people that we work with, where it's a lot. I mean, dealing with the trades and dealing with so many egos involved and kind of so many people involved, so many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. It's hard to make sure that your voice is what stays from the minute you walk in to the minute you walk out.
Right. Well, and part of being able to do that, in addition to growth, personal growth and personal confidence, is having done the very best that you can do on the project in the planning and the presentation stage, so that you really are confident in your work. Like, you can't just phone it in and then stand there and shove it down everybody's throat.
You cannot just phone it in. That is for sure, LuAnn. Trust me, I'm trying to figure out a way to just phone it in, but I'm such a control freak that will never happen. I make the joke that I'm perpetually on the verge of like, do I build an empire, or do I just kick it where I am right now? And I swear the problem with building an empire would be that I would have to delegate, and I would have to really kind of step my way out of every little last decision. I mean, the other day they were asking, like some of the girls in my work were laughing because they had to get approval on toilet paper holders. And then it was like a back and forth, and I'm driving, and finally I pulled over and I went, you know what? I don't really care.
Right. Like,
listen to this. Can you guys believe this? What's coming out of my mouth? I don't care. I trust that you're going to pick the finish, and I don't even care. Just do it. And they were like, whoa, are you okay? Are you
right. Do we have to take our temperature, or what's going on?
But I swear, like, it is like a delegating, and it's a deciding whether or not you're going to continue to just be like, are you going to be really cool with what you're working with, or are you going to just delegate everything and kind of tell everybody how to design? But you can't do that. I don't know.
Well, in there too is, I mean, I don't know if you've listened to Barclay Butera's episode yet, but his episode, his firm comes to my mind because he has, I don't recall off the top of my head, but something like 20 interior designers that work for him, and they execute projects without him, you know what I mean? That are in the Barclay Butera look. And I don't actually remember if he eventually oversees, a part of them, or they're just executing. But he's certainly not picking the toilet paper holder on those 20 projects. That's what I can tell you. Yeah. So, and Joni Vanderslice, the same thing. She's got probably, I think she said, about 15 senior interior designers working for her, and the same thing. And so you're right. It is a decision that somebody at your level, it's sort of, do you make this decision to start to duplicate yourself as a business person and filter in those trusted, very talented senior designers under you and start to let your empire grow? Or do you say, it's not really my cup of tea. I might not have to pick every, toilet paper holder, but I want to pick most things. I want to have my hand in most things. So it's a decision that only you can make for yourself, and there's no right or wrong in it. It's what's going to bring you joy, truthfully. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like it's a struggle, though. We definitely struggle all the time. I mean, I would say on a day, I don't know, we get pulled in a million different directions. We get asked to do TV shows. We get asked to do everything from everything, every single
all
thing.
Kinds of marketing,
all kinds of marketing,
branding opportunities. Yeah, it's not, you just can't just get up and do your design every day.
Yep. And it's either you become, Amber Lewis, the celebrity interior designer, whatever that means, like you're like the persona behind that brand, or you're, or you're just a boutique design firm designing amazing houses and you sort of stay behind the camera, if you will. And I've thus far stayed pretty much behind the scenes. I just do all the stuff. Everybody knows that it's me. I edit every single thing, literally down to toilet paper holders, obviously. And I oversee to, maybe to a fault, but at the moment that's what brings me joy. But there is a fine line that you walk of like, do you decide to jump and make it huge, or do you just hang out?
Well, and your daughter is young at this point, right?
Yeah. She'll be 8, and so I say, oh my gosh, she's going to be 8 in September. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I would say that honestly, that probably has to be a big component of that decision as well, because not for nothing, I have to say, I have said it on the podcast once or twice before, and I've said it on other podcasts where I get interviewed about running a business and having a family and all that stuff, because of course I'm on the other side of it, right? And I have to say that I truly believe that as important as every stage of a child's life is, as important as it is always to be the very best parent that you could be, that the age between, say, 10 and 16, 18 is, to me, much more intense and much more necessary to be there than it is from 1 to 10. And
I think I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, because
I don't know yet. She's not 10,
right.
But I can imagine.
The troubles that they face through those years are so much greater and so much more complex and so much more formative to them as people. This is my opinion. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a mother who's been down the road, okay?
Right.
And I just, I've said on the show before, too, that we had an agreement that I would go back to work when our child was born. And I said to my husband, that's fine. I will go back to work. We said 3 months. I lasted 4 weeks until I brought her, basin and everything to the office because I was bored out of my mind. Let's be real. But we agreed that I would go back to work, and I said, a counter agreement, that's fine. But when she hits middle school, then I'm home every day when school is out until she graduates high school. And my husband thought I was a little crazy at that. He's like, what, at that age? But that was our agreement. And, the proof in the pudding was that it was a good decision to make because, so you'll have to cross that bridge because your opportunities are, when you start to think about TV and things like that, that could take you away for not just a long work day till 8 or 9 o'clock at night on a job site. That could take you away for, days at a time. And so
absolutely. It's a time commitment thing.
Yeah. Bigger decisions.
I know. And it's funny too, because I definitely have like an amazing, I have a lot of like consultant people that I would speak to and kind of that could give me great advice about that. Part of that is like the management team that I work with that helps me with the brand, like blog sponsorship stuff I was talking about last time. And they always say like, it's a lot of time commitment. It's a nice way for people to put a face to your brand. And if you're really kind of into that, like if you think about what Nate Berkus has done for Target, like all of his line of stuff, I mean, he did such a great job with Oprah, and he was so cute and so lovable and so great. And he's just really solidified such a name for himself. And he is a great one to think about because he was just one of those guys that he had an amazing design firm. He probably didn't need to do any of that stuff. And in fact, I know his design firm, and like was listening or reading something a long time ago, like he has 2 lead, I think, main girls there, and they basically run the show. And I think he kind of phones a lot of it in, and I think he oversees what he oversees, but I believe the majority of his stuff is product. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
Right. And
he's solidified such a name for himself. And on the back end of that, I don't necessarily think a lot of that becomes a monetary, you don't make a lot of money for a long time. It's one of those things where like you devote so much time at first that you're shooting, you're designing products, and it's all kind of a crapshoot until it's not.
Right.
So you could potentially do 40, 50, you could do all these pilots and do all this stuff, and it may not ever get picked up, and then you've just basically wasted or talked yourself out of not being able to take on those clients. So
It's the
where I
truth,
would
yeah.
spend, where I would spend maybe 3 or 4 months, like on a pilot or doing whatever behind the scenes stuff. Not only do I need to get my employees to be cool with that, which
Right.
they're so busy, like, no, they don't have the time. Either do I. But on top of that, like, you also are away all the time, and it's not even a sure thing. So by the
Right.
time you're done, it's all said and done, you're
Yeah,
may not get anything out of
it's
it.
always an evaluation, and it depends. Like, and for somebody that's already a wife and a mother and has multiple employees, it is a decision that ripples down. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
interesting. Now, one of the things that you said at the very beginning that I wanted to go back to was that you said sometimes this industry is an industry where people are like, I'm not so sure that I'm going to let you know that I'm not so sure, right? You were
Right.
just like, right? And so talk about that a little bit, because I think that was the biggest eye opener for all of us listening to you last time. And the thing about that is I really want to drive home that people should ask, and especially if somebody like yourself says, I'm not always so sure. So what do you suggest? I mean, other than talking about it, where do you suggest that people go to find out, designers go to say, how do I talk about flat fees? How do I make comparisons? How do I understand? Like, when you came out and had to run your business and you found out, what did you originally do, and what would you suggest that people do now, like that could cut some of the agita away for them, that you're learning experiences?
You mean, everybody, here's one of the things that I can kind of go down a road. I could go down all kinds of roads, but one of the things that I'll sort of hone in on, so I don't kind of take anybody down too much of a wacky wild ride of where it's been since I got here. But essentially, so one of the biggest things that you have to figure out right out of the gate, and if you can figure it out, it will save you years of up at night ripping your hair out. I mean, invoicing is everything. And
Okay.
when you jump from one room to all of a sudden you're maybe doing 2 rooms, or maybe you're doing 2 rooms and a bathroom, or maybe you're doing a kitchen and an outside, you all of a sudden start to have to break that into a million little components. And you have to figure out, how do you not only charge for your time for that, but how do you make sure that invoicing makes sense to another party, right, who's ultimately paying for it?
Okay.
And how do you make sure that that comes across coherent and informed and detailed, and that you can then take that to a contractor? I mean, there's so many steps of this business that you just can't look at it like you're walking into some room, you're going to pick a couple paint colors and you're going to walk out. I mean, it is, imagine one room, one tiny little room, and every single element down to the molding on the fireplace has to be picked and chosen and ready to go. And so we tried 493,000 different invoicing programs. And I am not even kidding. Like, I think I was like at QuickBooks, and then we did FreshBooks. And at one point I was just hand doing them. I mean, I was like retyping them. It was ludicrous what I was doing.
Gosh.
And we finally landed on Studio Webware, which
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of this before. This is a complete endorsement for them. I'm not being paid, but if they want to call me and thank me afterward, I would actually want to thank them and hug them all day long. So they have this amazingly intuitive program, which really just shows you reports of your profit margins. It shows you like your selling versus what you're making versus when it's in stock, has it shipped? I mean, there's a whole way to simplify and organize your life. And it was by me logging on and doing the Studio Webware after figuring out all the duds before that. I can tell you that this was the thing that really helped me to hone in kind of my business. So lesson 1, invoicing is a huge one. 2, figuring out the contract. And I didn't really know where to look. So back to your question of like, how does someone look for that? And I kind of just bought a couple of books on Amazon just about contracts, period. And it wasn't even design specific. And so part of me just started to kind of put pieces of the puzzle together. I really just sort of made an outline of what does my project look like from start to finish? What are, every time something went awry in a project passed, and by awry, I mean like if there was a mistake made or whatever, how I would write that down and be like, make sure my next contract, it includes that clause to cover my butt, right? And so I would write this stuff down, and I kind of just over the years had compiled a list of things and addendums to where I started, which was a really, really basic contract. And that basic contract was just pretty much just a jumbled contract from numerous other ones that either were like from this a couple business books and contract books that I had pulled from, or even just looking online. And so then, I hired obviously an attorney. I didn't just put this together, but whatever, I had someone look it over. And then now I have the very like in-depth contract that I have now, which really kind of covers all my bases. But it was through learning, how my process is, what my mistakes were, whatever, and kind of eliminating that I really kind of decided what my way moving forward was. So invoice, contract, those are huge. And the other thing to do is there's also like this weird, a lot of people don't know the chain of command, right?
Okay.
So when I first started hiring employees and when I first started figuring out, I mean, the majority of all I knew was that there was a design assistant, there was maybe a senior designer or someone who was drafting, and then the principal, because the last lady I worked for, we were a team of, 3. There wasn't. So I think now she's much bigger, but now, like when I was working with her, it was just me, one other girl, and a CAD guy and her. So there was only 4. So when I started to get bigger, I started to realize like, wow, each little part of the project needs a person for that. So it wasn't just, like I needed a person for drafting. I needed someone who was a senior designer. I needed a project manager. I needed a junior designer. I needed an intern. I needed someone who's going to help me organize all the samples. I needed someone who was going to answer my general mailbox. I needed someone who was going to, it became
somebody to make lunch, I hope, right?
Literally. So it kind of became like, once I figured out like my chain of command. So like if I was at the top, if I was going to be the principal of this design firm, what exactly was my role and where was I going to fill in everywhere else? Like I had said my last podcast, that it really was, me learning kind of, I needed to hire people that basically
knew what you didn't know.
Yes,
what you
yes,
said. Yes,
exactly.
right.
So like where I lacked, they made up for it.
Right.
Where I didn't do CAD, they were doing the CAD and they were doing everything else. So when I kind of like started to get these bigger jobs and when I started to really pull those apart, I was really able to kind of hone in on what I needed and who I needed to fill those positions. And it was really helpful. Even if you're a small firm, you can't do everything on your own. So the most important thing is to figure out your system, basically,
right.
The way that kind of, how are you going to tackle a job from start to finish and who fills in?
And what you're saying is establish it clearly when you are small and are doing just maybe one room. And even though you might change and the system might evolve, but if you don't at least start with a system when it's one room, it's going to be very difficult to seamlessly add 2 and 3 and 4 rooms and a whole house project to your firm.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say to you, one other thing I was going to say about that is you've mentioned a couple of times how after each project you would sort of say, hey, that didn't work that time. I'm going to do it this way this time. And that contract, clause was missing and I'm going to add it this time. Do you have now actively in place a process for reviewing closed projects, Amber, when they finish, and then you still maybe sit down either yourself or with yourself and your senior members and say, okay, how did this go? Did it go well? Or is it just something you don't do formally, you just sort of in your own mind do?
I think because we're so small and mighty, like I have an office. It's funny. So I have an office within my office that I never go into. I work in the pit, if you will, with everyone else. Like I sit there and I work basically amongst everybody because I figured that it actually works better for me to be in and amongst what's going on. So I think because we're all so intertwined with all of the projects, I have a team that's dedicated to certain projects and another team that's dedicated to certain projects. So we kind of split into two, if you will, and then I oversee everything.
Okay.
But because I'm so involved with all of that stuff, we all hash out what doesn't work and what works as we go.
Okay.
So I think it's the main ones where we all kind of collectively are like, whoa, that was a big, thing that we need to never do again. That then I realize like, okay, then I go back to the contract and I fix it and I run that by my, lawyer, and then he tells me if that makes sense or whatever. And we kind of adjust that way. But I'm in a unique position where, because I'm so involved with everything that goes on here and with all the employees, that we all just kind of work together. And so I'm really kind of in the know of like, I need to make sure to watch my butt next time. And
how about not even just contract related, just process related? Are you still tweaking that, and you tweak it for each? Okay. I'll share with you, and anybody who's a loyal listener knows I'm like a broken record on this because I just thought it was so significant. Susan Brunstrom was on the show a year ago almost at this point, and she runs a pretty good sized firm out of the Chicago area. And you know what she does is she literally, at the close of every project with her team, which I don't remember off the top of my head, is probably 8 to 12 people, they actually do almost like a post-mortem review on every, like, I don't, what was that? There was a TV show that it was called something about Monday morning, like the surgeons all on Monday morning review all the people that died in the hospital over the week.
Oh,
yeah. Sanjay Gupta was on, wrote the show. I don't remember.
Love him.
Yeah, I know, right? And I think it might have been called Monday Mornings or something. And they literally go through when a project finishes, whether it's a 2-month project, a 6-month project, or a 1-year-long project. And I guess they must have a mechanism for keeping notes along the way, but they then review and say, where were the parts that were challenged? Where were the parts? And was there a breakdown because of communication? And what is our system for communicating? And what is our system for statuses? Whatever the things were. And they are always revising, and like the way you guys are always editing your design, they're always editing their process. And I thought that was very smart. And then the other thing that she does is that she takes each client to lunch at the completion of their project, and she asks them face-to-face, point-blank, what did you like about working with my firm and what did you dislike? Isn't that pretty cool?
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
And she's learned a lot from it, and she's made changes to her process from it. And then, of course, what's nice is that I'm sure, if somebody that takes that much care to organize their processes in their project management, they probably aren't getting a whole lot of things that they don't, they're probably not getting a whole lot of negative reviews at this point with their client meetings. But you know what? It also gives them an opportunity, gives Susan an opportunity as a principal to go back and like high five the team and say, guess what they really loved this time? They thought you this, that, and the other thing, Yeah. So I thought it was cool.
We sort of do that. I think one thing that I've come to just accept and know that every job is going to be different, especially in construction, is that there's always a variable with trades. So as efficient as we are, or as like much of a process as we feel like we have nailed, that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone that we work with is going to have that same process.
Right.
So one of the biggest learning experiences that we've ever had is that you have to assume that no one else is going to do your job for you, and that if you are not completely organized, even if it's redundant, you're going to get lost in their chaos. So no one is ever, like in our minds, we have to just assume no one is ever as organized as we are. We're always on like making sure that things are coming and where they are and what's going on. And we end up following up, incessantly with vendors to a point where like everyone's like, you just called. I know, but we're still waiting for an answer. So are you going to let me know an answer or whatever? And we feel very strongly that if we keep our organization solid in here, that we know that we're going to do 10 times more work than anybody that we ever work with. So like vendors or tradespeople, but it makes us feel good and comfortable knowing that we're, checking all of our boxes and dotting all of our I's and crossing our T's, because we do so much detailed work that they may not ever think about and do. So like for a contractor, for example, project managers who should be able to remember and know a plan word for word. There could be a binder at the site. There could be, we'll do like material lists and mood boards. Sometimes we'll tape them to the wall, staple them to the 2x4.
This is what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. And you don't even know. I'm on the phone, 45 minutes to 2 hours a day, just reminding them what's right there in front of their faces. And I think not all jobs are like that. A lot of jobs are not like that, but we do have some that are. And so it's been a real kind of trying, like learning lesson for us, is that we just have to know, we have to factor that into our fees and to our daily routine. Like we just need to know that our organization is worth its weight in gold, because we're still going to need to be on the ball with knowing everything, because we cannot expect someone else to.
I think that's really probably the smartest thing for running a project that you can express to people is to, because I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing, be responsible for your own stuff. That's exactly what you're saying, because I have to say that I have that relationship with a lot of designers where I'm the vendor. And of course, I'm trying to do my very best. There's no question, but I cannot tell you the number of times that I will get a purchase order that is, I don't know who can make a drapery or a window treatment from that purchase order. Like, it's like, you got to be kidding me. It doesn't even have a fabric name
drapes.
On it. You know what I mean?
It's just like drapes.
Oh,
that's
honest
what it is.
to God, I literally got them. One pair drapes, den. Oh, awesome.
Oh, okay. Right on.
Great. And so, thank God I got some notes to go with this. Okay. You know what I mean? And so the thing is that, the thing that's crazy about that is that look, this is what I know as a vendor. If I'm walking that job with you and I'm taking notes, and I'm a broken record with this, if I'm taking notes and you're telling me where the drape goes and how many widths you want and where the tape trim goes and, what the pattern is and all that other stuff, if you're not writing anything down and you give me a purchase order that says drapes den, don't come looking at me because you changed 10 things and didn't tell me, and you got drapes den the way you asked for them that day on the walkthrough.
Drapes den.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I can't tell you how many times I will give all my information to the workroom, and, we're a week, 10 days later, and we're like, what's the status on this order? And they're like, we don't have fabric for that. And we're like, yes, you do. Oh, well, we've got this pattern. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Because, the designer changed the fabric, didn't tell me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, Yeah.
And another thing too, like to point to that, it really does go to show too that building your vendor relationships is so crucial to running a smooth business. It's knowing and loving and trusting the people that you work with and letting them kind of learn your language. I mean, we work with drapery people that just know, I will never ask for that. I will never want that.
Right.
We were still as detailed as possible, but they understand my language now.
Exactly.
We work with furniture vendors that know that I'm never going to ask for that, and they don't even do it. Like, they know kind of there's a certain aesthetic and style that I have that I feel like when I've worked now with these vendors for so many years, they really understand and trust, and they know when I say things on my purchase orders that are very detailed, there's a photo of it. Not only that, like, I'm not just saying interpret this, I'm saying it's this.
Exactly.
It's your interpretation, it's actually this. So
no, I think that's great. And that's the thing. I'm happy to take responsibility for the things that I have learned with working with you over those years. I'm completely happy to take responsibility for that. I have a designer that literally prefers that every lead edge have a 3-inch double turned hem as opposed to a 1.5-inch double turned hem. He doesn't need to say it to me anymore. It's been 20 years. Exactly. Yeah. And if he gets a drape that doesn't have that, I'm never going to look at him and say, well, you didn't have it on your purchase order, because that is understood. But I'm talking about the changes or the things that you don't specify. And then, like you said, you're checking on and you're making sure they're doing the way you want. But there are designers that put things out there, don't make specifications, don't check on things, don't advise vendors, any vendor, not just drapery, of changes, and then want to go, well, how did that happen? It's like, well, what do you mean? How did that happen?
Yeah.
So I think it's great that you are advocating, taking responsibility in your own firm for giving the information in a detailed way to all of your trades, and then you're taking the next step of responsibility of checking and double checking that it's been received and understood and the message is loud and clear. Because that is very important, and I'm going to tell you why. It's important on every level. So on a big level like yours, it's important because you have so many details, and when details get overlooked, then the project doesn't come out looking the way you want, and yada yada. For a younger,
Well, I always say to the girls, it's like, you know what? I think surprises are great for a party, but not on a project. So surprises cost me money.
right?
And additional project management costs me money. I don't bill that to the clients.
Right. And
my
that's
mistakes.
that's what I was going to say. For a younger, newer designer, maybe it's, one sofa, 2 end tables, a lamp, and a pair of drapes. And if the drapes aren't right, there's the profit for that whole project gone.
Right.
That's,
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? There's no hiding that in your bottom line. There's no absorbing that in your bottom line.
No.
So for a bigger firm, there's the multitude of the amplification of the mistakes is challenging and crippling. But for a newer firm, it's the whole thing is a loss now. It's like you spent 6 weeks doing this project, and it's like, okay, awesome. It cost me $1,000.
Another thing, clients could care less whose fault it is. They are looking at you. You're the one who has to tell them. They only want to see it perfect, and it's none of their business whose fault it is. It's none of their business what you paid to make it right. It's your fault that it wasn't. So that's like the literally the mantra that we all say. It's like, well, if you're not organized, that's not anybody else's problem. I call it the NMP, not my problem. It is literally everything that happens outside. It's like, they don't care. Nobody cares. No. It only becomes, you have to make sure that it's perfect. And if there's other people excuses or they messed it up or anything like that, it doesn't matter. It's going to all come down on you anyway.
And how did you learn that? Did you learn that because, right. Did you learn it because in the beginning you weren't as locked down and you found that things weren't coming out and designed and actually built and finished the way you imagined, and you realized and said, oh, well, I guess I wasn't clear on my instructions, and that's why I got that result? How did you learn that? Or it
took one gnarly mistake. I think it was just one fail swoop, knock my knees out mistake that just, there go the whole profit from that job. And this was, years ago when it was small kind of thing. And I'll never forget, we were doing a tiny little powder bath, and I was working with one of my employees, and here just goes to show, like, you can't throw anyone under the bus too, because you are the one who's hiring everybody, right? So ultimately, if I'm the head honcho around here and I'm hiring people and they're not able to do their job right, again, clients don't care.
Right.
That all falls right back down on my shoulders. And that's ultimately my problem for not A, seeing their weakness, or B, hiring, someone that was slightly a little bit more competent to do that portion of the job. So if I'm going to assign you to do something, you better damn well know what you're doing. And we were on a job once, and, it was like a girl that worked for me, and she measured incorrectly and then was working with a vendor that we were not familiar with who also measured incorrectly. So basically we had customized a wash stand that didn't fit in a tiny little nook. So it had to fit. I mean, it was too big by like 6 inches. So we ended up having to cut it. It was just, it was a total nightmare. And I think it was that mistake that I broke into so many little pieces of more mistakes that, you know what I mean? Like, I just dissected it to the point where I was like, I can never do this again. I can never do that again. The communication was wrong. There was no paper trail. I didn't check the measurements. I didn't make sure, because I just delegated. And, now I know when I ask someone to do something, they better do X, Y, and Z. And if they don't do X, Y, and Z, then ultimately it's going to get messed up. And so there became like a protocol from that one mistake where it just blew up into everything. And one of the things I encourage, I think a lot of designers, a lot of younger kind of designers coming into this business too, walk in and somehow think that because you're walking into a firm that they have it all figured out. You're going to be taught what to do correctly, and then there's going to be no mistakes. But I've kind of tried to train everybody and try to tell everybody, remind everybody, treat the project like as if you didn't have a boss to make happy. Like, would you have done that way? I mean,
Right.
would you have caught that mistake if you weren't trying to just get it done?
Right.
Or if you critically think your own.
Think about it. Right. Don't just
Right.
execute. Just don't follow, the road in front of you. Actually analyze what you're doing while you're doing it, and have enough confidence to say, Amber, are you sure?
Yeah.
You want to do this here because it won't get through the door.
Don't just follow the motions. Like,
Right.
actually do like you gotta participate in the steps, especially if you plan on going on your own one day. That's one thing I'll definitely tell you. If you ever want to work for someone else and then get as much knowledge as possible and then go for your own, treat it like you are really having to focus on what you're doing and not just, stepping through the motions and kind of going through what you think you're supposed to do, because ultimately it's not always that way. I mean, we go in and we measure a room, let's just say, but we sometimes forget that there's molding that's there. Or we don't take that photo of something that I'm obviously going to need to see if I wasn't physically there to see it, or measure how high the window is from the bottom of the floor and measure the space. There's real critical stuff that you have to actually put your brain into, but those are measurements that you're going to need.
Right.
You don't just need the full box of the room. You need to actually walk in and do those measurements. So there's a process of treating it like it's your own, treating it like it's your own home. You really answer your own question before you have it, kind of walk into a job knowing what the questions are going to be and having the answer for them. Well, yeah, I took those measurements, or yeah, I looked at the color. I looked at, the paint can, they were this, and we need to match that, or whatever.
And how much more valuable you make yourself to the principal that you're working for when the principal has confidence that, yes, you're a team player and you do the different things and the components of your job that you're asked to do, but he or she has the confidence that you actually are cognitively thinking about it along the way, and maybe you're an extra set of a fail-safe for something that is measured wrong or is specified improperly or whatever. So that's a person who's going to rise.
Nothing makes me happier than doing something before I ask.
Yes.
Like, there's nothing and that's actually, I think that's just common sense for this can apply to all life situations.
Exactly.
Just do it. If you know that the question's going to be asked, just get it, answer it yourself.
Oh God, you sound like me. I'm like, really? Just do it.
Just leave obs.com, like, it's a series of me banging my head against the wall sometimes. Like, yeah, actually, it's no longer like that. I have a stellar team.
Yeah, that's how I am. I was just about to say the same thing with Kimberly. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, thank God for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, really, I have such an amazing, talented group of girls that are super efficient, and everybody wants to kind of, nobody wants to see.
Well, I like the message that you said in there too, because I don't know if you remember it from Kimberley Seldon's first interview or not, but she said the same thing when she had an interior design firm for about 10 or so years, and she said she was struggling and the firm wasn't necessarily profitable, and she felt like, most projects were sort of a pain in the, neck, know? And she just was like ready, she said, almost like to walk away from interior design. And as a last-ditch effort, she hired a business coach, and she said one of the most significant lessons that she learned from the business coach was that everything is her fault. And she said at first she was like, what are you talking about? But then she explained just what you explained. Yes, you have people in place. Yes, they have to be responsible. Yes, you have vendors in place. And yes, they have to be responsible for their jobs. But ultimately, you run a much better company and a much more successful company if you understand that everything is your responsibility. And, you just have to, you can't just say, hey, they got that part, And so I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I mean, I'll tell you what, you're really something else. I am so glad to, that we got connected through the Design Bloggers Conference. I mean, it's just, if I were having this conversation with somebody that is, what it is to me is to keep reminding myself of the level of success that you have achieved and how you are so just blatantly blazingly willing to be honest about sharing these things, because you're right. Most of the time when you have such a level of success, it's sort of like, well, I don't want to tell you how hard it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really something.
It is very hard. And it's definitely one of those things, like I said in the last podcast, that you have to have the chops for it. Not everybody can run their own business. I commend anybody that tries, and who can do it successfully. And it didn't come easy, and I work really hard, and, I'm perpetually on that ledge of like, do I continue to grow, or do I just stay right where I am and stay sane? Well, that's also questionable.
Yeah, that's also questionable.
Yeah, stay sane-ish, whatever. Or do I, move forward, and what's my next step? And I really just wake up every day of like, okay, I'm learning a lesson today. I'm basically just reminded to be humble, to come smart, to be open, to be changing. And of course, like, it's not all sunshine and roses. There's days where I'm just like, I want to go back to bed. But the majority of the time, and I think this is maybe a key to the success, is that I've accepted that there's going to be ebbs and flows. I think we all have to. I think successful business people know that there's going to be ebbs and flows. And I think that that you're not, no one's going to give you anything. You have to work for it, and you don't deserve anything until you work for it. And, there's only come now a time, I think 5 years later, where I say to myself, like, yeah, I can kind of not have to work that hard. I don't have to go home and work tonight, and or I do. Right. And there's times where I can pat myself on the back, and then there's other times where I just, kind of got to ground myself a little bit. Like, don't get too big for your boots, girl. You got a whole lot more learning to do, A, and B, what's your end game? So if you're you don't get too comfortable, because you better stretch yourself out a little bit in order to kind of jump to that next level. So I'm always learning, always growing, always, being humbled, always being kind of challenged, and I love it.
Yeah, no, you're the real deal. I truly, really, truly thank you. I mean, it just is remarkable that it's 5 years. It's like, what is that?
It's technically not even 5 years.
Oh,
it'll be
God,
4
don't tell
years.
us all that crap. That's insane.
It'll be 4 years in October.
Ay. Well, you know what? It's funny because that seems unimaginable, except that when you hear you talk and you hear all the things that you have learned and all the ways that you are willing to continue to learn, it's you're just an old, like, they say there's old souls. You're an old business soul in a young woman's body and a young woman's business.
I'll take it.
That's all I can tell you, because it's a remarkable evolution.
Just to kind of pull back the velvet curtain on that a little bit, though, I just want to say, though, too, that as much as that is flattering, and I do really, really, I believe that now. Like, I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can take those compliments now, and I completely believe it. I think if anybody can relate to me in the sense that if you were to tell me that this was going to be where I was 4 years ago, you could have blown me over. I would have never told you that this is where I was going to be. Maybe everyone else in my circle, because they know who I am and they know I'm so driven and whatnot. But I definitely didn't have a master plan. It's organically evolved, but I've always known that I wasn't happy with
status quo.
Or just like mediocre. I've always wanted to strive for more, and it wasn't always money driven or success driven or even whatever driven. It was always just driven from the point that I didn't want to sit still, and I didn't want to a lot of it was because of my daughter too. Like, I wanted to show her that you could be a strong, independent woman, and you could, make your own money, and you could do all this stuff and not, sit at home and wait for the kids to get home and dinner on the table. Like, there was other options. Not like that's bad, but there was other options.
Right.
That was all I knew when I was growing up. And and now like to be able to show that other side to my daughter is amazing. I mean, that was really the driving force. So anyway, 4 years ago, there was no master plan. It's just evolved this way. And I feel like anybody who's listening who thinks that they can do it, you can. Right. You don't know that you can't until you do, you know, it's just.
Well, and they can as long as they really hear both sides of that. And I know we said this in the last show, is it's not just wishing. It's doing. You know what I mean? It's doing. I had a listener emailed me today. Her name is Darcy, and she's in the New York area. And you know what? I got the nicest email from her today. She said, LuAnn, I love your podcast. I've been racing through, because she didn't find it from the beginning, you know, listening to episode after episode. And I just was moved to email you and give you a list of all the things that I have implemented in my business since listening to your podcast. And then she went down this list, like she changed her About Us page, she changed her bio page, she did this. I mean, literally like 10 things. And you know what I said back to her? It just struck me because listening to you. And I said, you know, first of all, you have to come on the podcast and tell everybody how you did these things. Not to be serious, right?
Right.
But the other thing is, I said to her, you know what? I am so happy for you, because do you know how many people hear the great ideas, kick them around in their head, and then 2 weeks later don't do them? I said, how amazing for you that you don't just listen to what other business people have done that are successful and then just say, oh, that's awesome, and maybe one day I'll be awesome too. That you're actually taking action. And that just reminded me of what you are. You know, you didn't know that you were going to be this person and this entity 4 years ago, but the fact of the matter is it didn't happen because you were just designing rooms and waiting for the universe to, you know, tap Amber Lewis on the shoulder and say, here, you're amazing. You know, you literally, I can hear it, both this podcast and the last podcast, what you said, you're driven. You are truly driven. So
I'm a doer, not just a thinker. It's the step between just thinking about it and actually doing it. They're two totally different things. Right. And until you do, it's just a thought.
Well, and it's the truth. And it's like the same thing with, I gave the presentation at the IWCE, and the title of it is, you know, excellence is a decision. You know, you can learn all day long how to be excellent, but until you actually decide to do it, it is just what you said. It's just an idea. Yep. And you have to take action. And so there are 1%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, of the people that take action. And that's the difference between, you know, big success and, you know, average success. And there's nothing wrong with average success, by the way. You know, average success is fine if you want to, you know, but don't aspire and want something at this level and think that, you know, well, okay, I'm just, you know, whatever. So that's why I love Darcy today too, because Darcy is on the track. You know, I'd be curious to see where she is in 4 years from now.
Exactly.
She is not letting any grass grow under her feet.
I remember, just, you know, to kind of like put some stuff in perspective, we were also talking on the last podcast about like with the sacrifices I made with my family and stuff like that. And I remember once my husband looked at me and he was like, I was super stressed out. I was flipping out about, you know, there's various times within my career where, you know, I'm not going to just say that I've been like this brazen, hey, I've got this entire time. I've definitely had moments where I've really just questioned, crap, I don't know if I can handle this. And I'm stressed out and I've got stuff going on and I'm like gaining weight at a rapid pace. And like, I don't go to the gym and all I do is like eat whatever. And I like, I'm miserable.
You're singing my tune now.
I know, right? So like, I'm just miserable and I might drink 1 too many glasses of wine or whatever. And like, I was getting to this level of just going like,
are you a camera in my house? I'm just saying.
Right. And so again, just lifting the veil of thinking everything's so perfect. So, you know, my husband looked at me and he was like, if you're so miserable, tell me what's success.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was like a light bulb went off and I like was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, what's good enough for you? Where's your like cap out? What are you willing to lose in order to be whatever that version of success is for you? And so I thought long and hard about that. And I I think where I turned a big corner for myself, and where I kind of remind myself often, like go back to that kind of like humbling, like get over, get out of your big boots kind of thing, like chill a little bit, is that I don't know what my version of success is. So I'm just proud of myself every new client I sign still.
Right.
Every single time I sign a job, I'm proud of myself. I don't have this crazy goal that I'm trying to get to. I just want to continue to do what I love and continue to do it well, and one up myself every single time. So,
I hear you exactly, because I feel like it's the same thing. It's like, for me, there's an inner bar of, have I done it the best I could do it? And that's when I have those moments of, like you said, where you're like, oh my goodness, and pass the wine and I didn't get to yoga again, because it's sort of like, that's my frustration. And when I have those, it's when I feel like, okay, I've got 5 things going on, and can I honestly say I'm doing all 5 of them to the best of my ability? And that's my bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I know that, hey, I finished the day and I did everything to the best of my ability and everything wasn't perfect, I'm okay with that. But I struggle when I'm like, yeah, not so good on that today. You know what I mean? It's like, that's where I'm going to bang myself in the head, and I'm going to go, okay, big girl panties. Let's do this a different way tomorrow.
Make it happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, don't be a victim about it. Tomorrow's a new day. You're going to rise again, and you're going to learn from this mistake.
That's the hugest thing. Don't you think that's the number one thing for me? I think of a truly successful entrepreneur is not put off by a failure. It's like you mentioned it several times in the conversation. When something goes wrong, figure out the solution for it and don't repeat it the wrong way the next time. There are no failures. I was asked to do an excerpt for a book for somebody recently, and apparently the chapter that she was working on was the failure chapter, and I got like 6 questions about describe your failures in business. I swear to God, I stood there. I was like, I finally asked my husband, what would you say was our biggest failure? And he just looked at me and he's like, we had a failure? I'm like, right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because
there is no failure. It's all lessons, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I just feel like, and that's, to me, a big differentiator with somebody who truly has some drive and has that entrepreneurial streak, because it's all the journey. It's all part of it. It all makes you who you are. And you've expressed that so many times. And I'm so grateful for hearing you express it in the filter of your career, that it's just, it didn't go great this time, do it different next time. Don't fall down and crumble. Like, what are you doing on the floor? Get up. We got another project to do.
Exactly. And also, there's no time to whine. And when you're trying to, ain't nobody got time for that. Nobody got time for that. We all got
the only wine is in that Cabernet glass. Let's be real.
Exactly. Let's get real. We're working with, like I said, we're working on this really awesome project right now. And one of the architect firms that we're working with is kind of the same. They, 80 employees or whatnot. And we're working with this incredible team under, the names of the founders. And it's been so interesting to watch him know that his name isn't on the door, but then he's got like this whole amazing, strong crew. And even watching them filter out their tweaks and their not mistakes, but like their stuff as
calibrations.
As freaking talented and as serious and amazing and world renowned as they are, there's like moments of weakness a little bit. There's moments of being like, wow, they're humans. Oh my God, what a concept. We're all trying to figure this out. Nobody has it in a book. There's not like a Bible of business. There is no right way. Everybody.
Well, and the thing is, there are Bibles of business, but then as soon as you add the human factor to it, it all has to be, really.
Always the variable.
That's it. You got to go with the flow, and you got to just keep swimming upstream and get there.
No, it's like the idiot variable. And I say that to myself, like there's some days when I'm like, I just don't know if I can answer that question with any kind of smart right now. I have no idea. I'm going to tell you something. I should probably check my facts really quick, because I actually have no idea.
It's the truth. It's the truth. So, there's an interesting coincidence, Amber, that I wanted to just bring up before we close out the show. I recently interviewed Anna Brockway again because, Anna is the founder of Cherish, and she's one of the sponsors of the show. And we were chatting, and I said to her, do you have any designers that are particularly fond of Cherish and using it? I wonder if I know any of them or whatever. And she's like, oh, Amber Lewis is a big user of our platform. And I was like, no way. So you really like it? You do?
Yes, I love Cherish because I do I mix so many vintage pieces into my work, and that's sort of like my signature style, if you will. I don't ever do anything all from big box stores. It's not like I'm just pulling everything out of a catalog. Actually, every single design I've ever done is infiltrated with all kinds of vintage stuff. And so, I shop for a living, and Cherish is such a great, I kind of get a little thrill. It's a little addicting to see new arrivals and see what comes. And I definitely scope it, stock it, / love everything about it.
And it's a great thing, isn't it? The way they do that whole white glove delivery that you don't have to worry about it, right?
It's great because also too, I know this sounds like, designer secrets, here we go, but you can make offers, which is killer. So like if you know that you're going to have to, like you're shipping something from across the country and you want to offset that cost a little bit by knowing you're going to have to pay shipping, but maybe the white glove, is X amount of dollars. So you're like, maybe I can, you can make an offer, which is kind of great. So you can sort of offset, like if you only have a budget to spend $250, but white glove is $400 or whatever it is, you kind of, I'm like, oh, I'm going to just see if I can offer a little bit lower. And they do. Also, if you're to the trade, they do like a trade kickback program.
I know, right?
Everybody knows that, right?
But the thing is, don't worry about it here because I don't think there's many consumers listening to this podcast. And hey, this is to the trade.
Whatever, it is what it is. I'm sourcing it. I'm still doing all the work. It's not like
right.
Exactly. And so it's just an incentive to want to continue to shop with companies like that because they are working for the designer. They are wanting to make sure that the designer, which is probably their biggest customer, keeps coming back.
Right. And one of the things that she was telling me about it too is that designers that are taking place in show houses, or even if I don't know what, but she just said that she's never met a designer that doesn't have like a room full of stuff that, isn't on the job or had to come off of a job or whatever. And so it's a great platform apparently for, reselling the things on projects that you're not using, right?
I know. I got to do a sale with them. Anna's great. I met Anna, I've met her a couple times now, but I met her for the first time, I think last year's LCDQ. And I was like an ambassador for the event, and I was on a panel, and it was like a love it or list it kind of thing, or love it or hate it.
They did that today. I saw it on Instagram feed.
I know. Today is LCDQ. And I'm so bummed. I was actually asked to do the Arteriors window, and I've been out of town, and so I've been traveling, so I wasn't able to make it happen. And I was like, oh my God, it's the first year I've ever been asked to do a freaking window, and I have to say no. That's like been my lifelong goal, which is so pathetic because I like kind of wanted to be it, like doing a window. And I used to get so mad because I wouldn't even get invited to parties. I'm like, what the? And then like the one year I get invited to not only everything, but like to do a window, and I have to totally not.
Talk about arriving and you can't go.
I know. These are like real people problems here. Come on now. But anyway, so Anna was really cool. And I did that like kind of love it, hate it thing with them last year. And I saw that they did it again this year. I'm like, oh man. And I think she came after me during DBC too, at the Design Blogger Conference. Yeah.
Yes. She was one of the sponsors of the DBC.
Oh, she's awesome.
So, she really is. She is such a smart lady too.
Yeah,
oh my goodness. Yeah. But I thought that was interesting that she said that you were one of their really huge users of the platform. And I thought that was awesome.
I think I was like one of their first kind of like designer spotlights too, when they first opened a long time ago. Not even that long ago. I feel like, didn't they just
I think it's only 3 or 3.5 years.
Exactly. Like I would say it's probably around the same like trajectory as mine. And I think I did a sale with them, which was fun. I like curated a couple things, which is cool. But I got to do another one. I have a warehouse. I just got a bigger warehouse that's just full of stuff.
Well, it's funny because I'm sure people ask you all the time, where did you find this? Where do you get that? And the fact is there's probably a lot of designers listening that maybe aren't aware of Cherish. And it's like, oh, that's where Amber gets her stuff? Okay.
Don't tell all my secrets. But,
Exactly.
Cherish is good. Cherish is really good.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad I remembered to bring that up. I'll tell you what, you are a particularly amazing human, Amber. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoy your company, and I'll tell you what, one day I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. That's for sure.
I know. I'm so bummed we didn't get to meet at the blogger conference, but next time.
It'll mean more the next time, though.
Exactly. All right, well, LuAnn, thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you, Amber. My great thanks to the featured sponsor of our podcast, Cravat Inc. Of all the terrific things about Cravat, do you know about curatedcravat.com? I know you've heard me tell you all about it for this last year and a half, but have you taken a minute to really go and look and check out curatedcravat.com yet? You have to see this collection of the most unique, high-quality finished products for the home. The collection includes furniture, lighting, bedding, rugs, accessories, and more. It is so comprehensive. It features customized designs as well as unique hand-picked pieces from the global design market. CuratedCravat.com is available exclusively to the trade. That's right. No direct consumer purchasing. They have your back at Cravat Inc. And have you checked out the innovative ready-to-ship upholstery program? This is groundbreaking in our industry. Where else can you find someone that delivers custom quality furniture fast? I'll tell you where else. Nowhere else. You see, it's the combination custom quality and fast. That is at curatedcravat.com. You can shop the site by product category, by stylized product stories, and through the curated rooms designed by the industry tastemakers. At curatedcravat.com, they are committed to making your job more efficient by providing unmatched customer service coupled with an exceptional product offering. Cravat Inc. stands firm in their mission to serve the interior design trade at the very highest level. And the last and one of the most fabulous features is the process is so simple. That's right. Design, click, deliver. Easy as that. One last thing. Cravat Inc. has a thank you to you as a listener of the podcast. If you are on the site and you are ready to make a purchase, any one purchase, you can get 10% off as their thanks to you. Enter the code CKPodcast at checkout for 10% off any one purchase. Well, I do thank them very much, and I really do hope that you will take a moment to see how CuratedCravat.com can help you run your business more efficiently. Okay, a couple of key takeaways from Amber's experience. The first is she recognized pretty soon after she started her own firm that while she had experience in designing, styling, and working with clients, she didn't have so much experience on the business side of things, the invoicing, the bookkeeping. What did she say? She exactly said, invoicing is everything. Amber described how she quickly learned that if she expected to go from projects that were 1 room, 1 bathroom to 3 rooms, 4 rooms, and on to whole house projects, that she had to get invoicing down. And Amber tells you to do the same thing, to get all of your systems down while you are small so that you can grow and maintain order, efficiency, and profitability. We say that all the time here, don't we? If you want to scale up, if you want to grow, you need to be able to duplicate yourself, and you cannot do that without systems. Amber echoes that, and she adds how important it is, especially when you do get large, because when you manage huge projects like hers, she said that's the difference to doing it professionally. There's something in there that reminded me also of an episode recently, number 179 with Lynn K. Leonidas. Amber described how in her previous positions, she wasn't involved in the back end of the businesses, but Lynn specifically described how at each position that she had before she opened her own firm, that she specifically made a point to get involved in the back end of the business and specifically made a point to learn the project managing part of each of the positions that she was in. And she said that this dramatically helped her in the beginning in starting her own firm. Now, let's be real for a moment. Not having done this hasn't exactly curtailed Amber's success. So if that's not lost on me, okay? So, but I would tell you this. If somebody like Amber Lewis is telling you that it could have been a little bit easier for her coming up and had less growing pains, then I would say that's advice well worth taking. And I'm going to add to it that I think it's become pretty clear, at least it has to me, in two conversations with Amber, that she is not your garden variety go-getter entrepreneur. Amber is somebody with a particular drive and a laser focus that is very, very, very rare. I mean, you guys know that I'm 100 years old in business all this time, and I have had a million conversations with business owners, and she is a rare bird. I'm going to tell you that right now. She definitely is. I'm sure that she was able to overcome that because of this truly disciplined drive and determination that she has. There's no doubt in my mind that after she spent all day designing, she probably spent hours and hours at night figuring out how, like she described it, how to do her contracts, what should they be in. She described how when she would have a certain contract then and she would run into a problem on a project, she'd write something else into the contract. She was very meticulous about it. She just didn't have her growing pains and mistakes and then move on and say, I don't know why the same thing keeps happening over and over again. So if you're that girl or guy, well, then good on you, and do it the long way and do it the hard way. But you know, I would just say when somebody like Amber says to you that these are important for you to learn and get down, then I would pay attention to the business side, particularly if you are new in business, okay? You'll always be able to up your game on the design side. That part, not that design is easy, but that part is easier to you because that's where the fulfillment and the joy comes from, right? Now, the other thing I notice is how hysterical Amber is. Hello, I'm sure you noticed it too. She just has a way of saying a thing, that describes a business concept or a lesson that just seems to cut through the nonsense. And I thought it was hysterical. And I started to sort of make a little list of these things. And then I decided to call them Amberisms. So if you want your free PDF of my list of Amberisms, go to www.windowworks-nj.com/Amber and click on the things I learned from Amber Lewis. All right. Now, before I let you run off, I want to share with you that the week before this show airs happened to be fundraising drive week at NPR. If you're familiar with NPR, National Public Radio, then you know what I mean. 3 times a year, 4 times a year, they get on there and they tell us that, well, because they're a radio station that doesn't have commercials, they rely on listener contributions and paid sponsorships, right? And they get on there 3 or 4 times a year and they say to us, okay, instead of having commercials all year long, just 3 days a week, every 4 months or something, we basically ask you for money. And what they do is they tell us, they really... they're right. They're smart, because I don't know about you, but when I'm listening to it, I start to feel guilty and I'm like, all right, let me get my credit card out, because they actually say, look, if you like the content, if you like the things that we're doing, if you like the hosts of the radio shows that we have and the things that we put together for you, is it worth $1 a day to you? And of course, it's worth $1 a day. If they ever went off the air, I'd be like, oh my God. So the thing is, it got me to thinking. Now, it didn't get me to thinking I want you to send me money. Absolutely do not want you to send me money. But it got me to thinking that maybe I would love it if we could just think of this as a 1-day only fund drive for iTunes reviews. Do you think you'd get on board with that with me? Because I know at this point I have thousands of listeners, right? I have my Libsyn stats. I know exactly how many listeners we have. And yet I have 131 iTunes reviews in the U.S. at least. And I just thought it would be really swell if everybody listening to this show just said, okay, that's it, line in the sand. I haven't left a review yet. I'm going to flip over there to iTunes and I'm going to, today is the day that I'm going to give it a rating and a review. And I would just really love it if you would do that. Just like NPR, the reviews for me are what the money is for them, because this show does come to you based on sponsors, paid sponsors, because it's a business. Here's a heads up, folks. Okay. But it is based on the paid sponsors, and the iTunes reviews are the best form of social proof for potential sponsors to understand the value that the show has for you. I know the value that the show has for you because you often message me on Facebook and Instagram, and you do it publicly and you do it privately, and I get these passionate emails from you, and I appreciate it so much. But if you would take a moment and bring that to iTunes, I would really, truly thank you. And so I have one-day mission for you. It's a one-day fun drive mission for iTunes rate and reviews. So please be a part of the movement. I would be ever, ever so grateful. All righty. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed listening to Amber again. I know I love talking with her again. And, look for all the stuff on Instagram today and Facebook and Twitter. Have an excellent day, everybody. Thank you for joining me again today for another episode of A Well-Designed Business. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks in Livingston, New Jersey, your trade resource for custom window treatments and awnings. Learn more about WindowWorks at www.windowworks-nj.com. All of our music is original music by Room 2 Productions. Please contact us if you want to learn more about original music for your business or your events.